I'm appalled it took me this long to figure it out and that I just told her boyfriend about this, but I swear it was completely accidental. Basically, when I was 13 years old, my older brother Max was 17 and my older sister Helen was 15. We played a lot of sports and were involved in many clubs. The way our schedules worked out, most evenings it would be me and her or me and my brother eating dinner together, so at least one of them could walk me home every day. High schoolers had late practices, which meant that they would eat dinner at school before training pretty often, while the other sibling and I ate dinner together. My parents both traveled a lot and worked late often, so we ordered a lot of pizza, etc. One evening after practice, Max came into my room and basically asked me to tell him how much Helen eats during dinner with me. I was like, weird, why? And he said he thinks Helen might have the stomach flu, but is keeping it a secret. That kind of confused me. But he said he was worried, and when you're 13 and your way cooler older brother asks you to do something, you say yes. I remember vaguely telling him that 3 out of 3 takeout dinners we had this week she'd eaten a few bites of and thrown away. And like immediately, the next day maybe both parents were home and they had a family discussion that I had to be sent to a friend's house during. Most definitely an intervention. After that, we stopped doing dinners with just Helen and I. Either a parent was with us or Max. I did not notice anything else, but I am sure they were just hiding it. I do remember vividly once when it was just Helen, Max, and I fought with her about which restaurant we would get takeout from, and later Max told me that Helen's got stomach problems and she's not eating enough, and to make it easier, we should let her choose restaurants from now on. Then I understood it was like when you were sick and you do not want to eat anything but your favorite food. I remember saying she had been eating more since mom and dad got back, and my brother responding, good, but do not comment on it to her face, she's embarrassed. I was not a very picky eater, and Helen most nights would just choose pizza or something I would like anyways. Especially as I got older, I just accepted it. I think when I fought with her about what to order, she'd annoyed me about something else. It was honestly ingrained in me to just let Helen choose. Even yesterday when we met her, Max and I let Helen choose what we ate. So here's where I messed up. Max and I live in the same city. I am 20, he is 24, she is 22, and Helen visited with her boyfriend so we could meet him. The boyfriend is nice, and after dinner we're all sitting together drinking and the 4 of us are talking about sibling fights. The boyfriend tells us about how he used to fight tooth and nail with his younger brother about what restaurants they ate at. My dumb self, without hesitating, says, "We never fought about that. Max just told me it is always Helen's choice because of her stomach issues." Helen apparently did not know Max knew about this and said to Max wide-eyed, "You told him about that?" How I did not see this and realize what was going on was beyond me. Her equally clueless boyfriend asks, "What stomach issues need you to always choose the restaurant you eat at?" Clearly teasing. I said out loud, on autopilot, obviously without thinking first, because I'm clearly just slow, it was because she was not eating enough. Right then, when I made eye contact with her, I figured it out. She asked her boyfriend to excuse us for a minute. I tried to apologize, but she really did not want to hear it. She yelled at Max for telling me until she was in tears. She yelled about how eating disorders were personal and how Max had promised that no one knew except mom and dad, and who else did he tell? Then she asked where I got off on hiding this for years and letting her think I didn't know, and why I thought I could tell her boyfriend about this. She was sobbing, heaving, crying so hard I could barely understand her. And then she left, grabbed her stuff and the boyfriend, and left. I honestly have no idea what my next move is. I texted her apologizing and explaining this basically, but she's ignoring me. I feel really bad. I adore her and I never ever want to hurt her. In summary, I accidentally told my sister's boyfriend about her old eating disorder because I didn't realize it was one and just thought it was a stomach issue my brother mentioned years ago. She got upset and I feel awful.
So this all started a few months ago when I met my new neighbor. Nice guy, mid-50s, retired car salesman, very chatty. We're making small talk one day and he asks what I do for a living. For reference, I actually do work at a hospital, but I'm not a doctor. Over the years, I've learned to stay vague about my job because the second you say I work in healthcare, People either start telling you about every rash they've ever had or get weirdly defensive about their eating habits, so I just said, oh, I work down at the hospital in the medical field. Harmless, right? Apparently not. For context, I live in a house that looks nice from the street. It's big, kinda stately even, but that's only because I inherited it from a rich grandparent. I am not rich. The driveway's cracked, half my gutters are held up by a wing and a prayer, and the lawn is constantly in some stage of almost mowed. But to someone driving by, I can see how it might scream doctor money. Fast forward a few weeks, my neighbor and I are talking about cars. He used to sell them, so I ask what he thinks about a certain model. He laughs and says, well look, just because you can afford it on a doctor's salary doesn't mean you should go buying something flashy. I laughed and was getting ready to tell him, but midway through our conversation, he got a call. Like I said, he's chatty in that he monologues a lot, and it's hard to get a word in edgewise. I told my wife later that I think the neighbor thinks I'm a doctor and I didn't get a chance to correct him, and we both got a chuckle out of it. We thought it was funny and decided to just let it ride. Inside joke, no harm, no foul. Also, I know he talks to a lot of the other neighbors a lot who know I'm not a doctor, and I figured he would just eventually hear through the grapevine that I'm not, so no biggie. A little while later, he calls me one evening, says another neighbor fell and hit her head, and asks if she should go to the doctor. I'm thinking this is just a normal neighbor check-in kind of thing. So I say something like, yeah, she should probably get checked out just in case it's a concussion. I didn't realize it at the time, but that apparently confirmed in his mind that Dr. Bigman Beats was making a house call by phone. From there, it escalated. Slowly at first. Hey, Bigman Beats, you think this looks bad? With the accompanying photo. Are you allowed to write me a prescription for X? What's the best over-the-counter thing for acid reflux? Every time I dance around it, like, sorry, I can't help you with that, or, I'm not sure, you should have your doctor take a look at that. I'd say it in the most neutral, non-committal way possible, thinking he'd eventually catch on. I probably should have just ripped the band-aid off, but I unfortunately passed that point where it would be awkward to correct him. If anything, my vague answers reinforce his belief that I was some kind of humble physician trying to avoid liability. A different neighbor later told me that my neighbor said to him, he's so busy being a doctor he doesn't have time to even fix his house or mow his lawn. My neighbor thought him thinking I'm a doctor was equally as hilarious as my wife and I did, and didn't tell him either. At this point, it's been months. For as a moment, I still think I'm Dr. Bigman Beats, the neighborhood doctor who lives in the big house with the bad lawn. I eventually will have to tell him before at the next homeowners association party, heaven forbid someone has a heart attack and he comes to me to save the day, and I have to break it to him, I'm just a humble healthcare worker. In summary, I told my neighbor I work at the hospital and stayed vague to avoid weird questions. He assumed I'm a doctor, which I initially found funny, but because I never corrected him, it slowly escalated until he now thinks I'm his personal neighborhood doctor, and now I will end up having a super awkward conversation with him about it. At the age of 22, I found myself consumed by a tumultuous childhood, scarred by the tyrannical reign of my father. He had returned from his military retirement when I was just 6 years old, transforming our home into a veritable boot camp. His presence was suffocating, his rules absolute. We lived under the thumb of a self-appointed king, where the mere hint of dissent was swiftly silenced. "You do not put food on the table, do you?" he would sneer, his words a venomous reminder of our powerlessness. The consequences of defiance were severe, as I learned through the distorted reality of television shows. In our household, punishment was not grounding, but a brutal cocktail of physical and verbal abuse. My mother, too, was a victim, trapped in a cycle of gaslighting, convincing us that life could be far worse without him. My siblings, sensing the danger, retreated into a shell of silence, their own stories of trauma hidden behind the facade of obedience. As the eldest, I harbored a deep resentment, swallowing the bitter pill of oppression that slowly eroded my self-image and tainted my interactions with the opposite sex. Despite my father's attempts to thwart my escape, I managed to break free, leaving the state to pursue a college education. Those hallowed halls became my sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without the suffocating presence of my tormentor. Through the guidance of a counselor, I began the arduous process of unpacking the emotional baggage that had weighed me down for so long. I discovered that flinching at a raised voice was not a normal reaction, a stark reminder of the abuse that had permeated my very being. Returning home for a weekend visit, the memories of my past came flooding back. As my younger sister, a mere 16 years old, sat on the living room sofa, stressed about a school project, my father's condescending voice cut through the air. He demanded her presence at the breakfast table, his ridiculous rule that when one eats, all must eat. I tried to offer her a comforting word, a suggestion to seek an extension from her teacher, but my father's explosive reaction silenced me. "Shut up," he hissed, his fork slamming against the table. In that moment, the trauma of my childhood came rushing back, undoing months of progress in my quest for inner peace. I watched in disbelief as my family continued to eat, their silence, a desperate attempt to prevent the situation from escalating. It was a tactic I knew too well, a survival mechanism born of necessity. The realization that my younger siblings were now subjected to the same abuse that had haunted me ignited a rage within. As I stared at my father, my eyes brimming with tears, he met my gaze with a contemptuous, "What the heck are you looking at?" I tried to walk away, to remove myself from the toxic atmosphere, but he commanded me to stop and sit back down. Something within me snapped, 20 years of suppressed emotions bubbling to the surface. In that moment, I knew I never wanted to see this man again. He rose from his seat, his intention to strike me clear. A lifetime of being silenced, of being told to shut up, came rushing forward. Without thinking, I swung, my fist connecting with his nose. He stumbled back, pressing me to leave and never return, as if I were a stranger in his home. Fueled by fear and adrenaline, I fled to my room, gathering my belongings before fleeing the scene of my long-awaited retribution. Though I knew that violence was not the answer, it had been my delayed reaction to the years of abuse I had endured at his hands. As I drove away, the gravity of my actions sunk in, and I trembled at the thought of the consequences that would await my family in the aftermath of my outburst. In summary, a lifetime of abuse at the hands of my strict, tyrannical father had culminated in a single moment of physical altercation, a desperate attempt to break free from the chains of my past and find the strength to heal and move forward.
It was Halloween and I had just picked up my kid from school. As we drove through our neighborhood, we were admiring the cool Halloween decorations on display. The wind was blowing fiercely, and the trash can had been blown into the road. I pulled over, and my backseat driver, my kid, and I agreed that it would be the nice thing to do to move the trash can back to the curb. So I hopped out of the car and approached the can. The lid was open, lying on the street, and I started to push it forward to lift it and move it to the curb. This was a task I had performed many times before, and I had no idea what was about to happen. As I lifted the can, I stepped onto the lid, and my feet flew out from under me. I fell face first into the lip of the can. I stood up, a bit shaken, and muttered a few choice words to the can before putting it back where it belonged. The next thing I knew, I had blood on my glasses, and when I touched my head, I realized I had injured myself. I got back into the car, and my kid and I exchanged a glance. I said, "Well, that was stupid." To which my kid agreed and asked if we were going to the doctor. I had buried my face in a spare hoodie to stop the bleeding, so my kid probably did not hear my reply, but I said no. I called my husband to inform him of my situation, and he told me to stop saving the world. We decided to continue our drive to see the Halloween decorations, although I was more focused on my bleeding head and driving. When we got home, we went to the bathroom to clean up, and my kid got to play doctor. However, when I saw the extent of my injury, I decided it was time to visit urgent care. I drove myself to urgent care, although the pain was becoming unbearable, and I was crying. The drive was not long, which was fortunate, as I had to drive with one eye closed due to the discomfort. When I arrived, I was relieved to find that I was the only patient, as I was not exactly presentable at that moment. The receptionist was very kind and she called someone over to take a look at me. The nurse practitioner examined me and determined that I needed to go to the emergency room. They cleaned me up and wrapped me in gauze until the ambulance arrived. At the emergency room, I was initially sent to the waiting room, where I waited for about 2 hours before being called back for further examination. I was given some medication to manage my pain, which was a welcome relief.
After a series of checks and a computer tomography scan, I received 2 staples to close my wound. I was grateful that I did not need to have my head shaved as initially suggested. While waiting for the results of my computer tomography scan, I received some topical lidocaine to numb the area, which helped with the discomfort. There was a concern about a potential bleed, so the medical staff discussed the possibility of keeping me under observation for another 6 hours. However, the head trauma specialist decided that I had been observed for a sufficient amount of time and discharged me. I have been home for about 20 hours now, and I am still recovering. My kids have been calling me a zombie due to the staples, although I am not allowed to eat their brains, much to my disappointment. My husband did a great job of making sure our kids had a good Halloween, and we still have the rest of the weekend to carve pumpkins. I'm feeling a bit down, but I'm grateful for the support of my family. In summary, I tried to put a trash can back in its place, ended up cutting my head open, and spent Halloween in the emergency room. I am not supposed to be using screens right now, but I hope you can laugh at my expense. I know I will once my staples stop hurting.